That single moms brunch was so much fun to be a part of. If you are wanting to be part of a church that wants to impact its community, then I want to encourage you to build roots here, because that's something that we want to do as a church family consistently. We had, I think, between 50 and 60 moms show up. We had about 65 to 70 kids that were being washed. I think it was 50 to 60 cars got washed and detailed. And there was, I think, something around 100 volunteers that showed up on Sunday morning this last week. And so just give yourselves one more hand for everything that this church community got to be a part of. Another thing I want to remember today is it's Memorial Day weekend. And I know that there's some people in this room who are veterans or come from veteran families. Some people who may even have a veteran who in their family who passed in a war. And we just acknowledge and remember today that we are here because people have been willing to give up their lives in service to the rest of their fellow citizens. And so that's just something else we want to remember today as we go into the rest of this. As Pastor Tim said, we're going into a series called Real Good Life. And, I have to do this. I have to. How many of y'all want a good life? Okay. You can raise your hands. Don't feel like you have to raise your hands. It's the most obvious question I think I've probably ever asked on stage. How many of y'all want a good life? I want a good life. I want a life that feels adventurous, but also rooted enough to be meaningful. I want a life where my passion matches up with what I do for work. I want a life where my relationships are solid. Right? These all sound pretty good, right? I want a life where I'm able to make time for everything that's important. I want a life where I'm able to have good health fairly consistently. I want a life where money isn't a concern. It'd be a good life, right? Problem is, we're all living a real life. A real life where money usually is a concern. Health is a bit of a wild card, where it feels like you never have enough time in the day, where you sometimes are trying to do what you love, as you have a passion, you want to do what you love and make it your work. You try to be an entrepreneur and make what you love your work, and then all of a sudden you stop loving it because now it's your work. It's just hard. Life is real, okay? We're living a real life. You want a good life, but you're living a real life. But one of the things that I love about Scripture is there's an invitation all throughout Scripture. And if we go to just one place where it's made, when we look at Jesus makes it himself. He says, I have come that you might have life and life abundantly. And then another place he says, come to me, all you who are tired and exhausted, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke, take my teachings and my way of life upon you, and you will find that burden is easy and it's light. And it feels like Jesus is almost saying in all of this, it's like, listen, I know that you want a good life. I know that you're living a real life, but I want to extend an invitation to you to a real good life. Not some sort of fantasy world that's just like, oh, good, I really hope this all falls in my lap someday, but also not just this real existence that's always suffering and exhausting and all of that. But what if you're invited into a real good life? We're going to be looking at, over the next few weeks, what does it look like to live a real good life? And we're not going to be able to cover everything because obviously there's a lot to that. But we're going to go through the story of Joseph. We're going to look at 4 different pieces of his story and how those are pieces of what it looks like to live a real good life. And Joseph is a guy who could probably speak to this better than most. If you know his story, it's pretty wild. I'm just going to give you a really brief overview. Joseph grows up without a mom. He's also in a family with incredibly complex family dynamics, and he's on the younger side, and he's the favorite of his father. So that adds to the complexity. His brothers hate him so much that they end up selling him into slavery as soon as they can. He goes into slavery in Egypt. While he's there, he kind of builds some trust, works his way up, and then he gets accused of something he didn't do, and then gets thrown in prison. And then while he's in prison, he kind of works his way up, gets some trust there as well, and then experiences some disappointment. And then all of a sudden, Pharaoh, out of nowhere, several years later, has a dream. He can't figure it out. And so Joseph, who had interpreted some dreams, ends up in front of Pharaoh to interpret the dreams. He interprets them, says there's going to be 7 years of 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And then Pharaoh goes, what should we do about it? And so Joseph gives him a plan. Pharaoh goes, okay, you're in charge of it now, and you're the second in command of Egypt, which is pretty wild. And then while he's doing this, the famine shows up. His brothers come to Egypt to get food. They don't know it's him. This is straight out of a movie, okay? They don't know it's him. And he kind of messes with them a little bit, trying to figure out where they're at in life. And then he finally forgives them, reveals who he is to them. And then Pharaoh says, hey, bring your whole family here. I'm going to give them the best land in the entire empire of Egypt. It's a wild story. And when you condense the story down, it can sound a bit like a fairy tale. But when you realize there were years in there full of trauma and pain, full of being ripped out of where you knew and what you had as your good life, and then being taken to some place that's completely out of your control. When you realize that he was in prison for years and years and years with zero hope of getting out of that ever, okay, Joseph lived a real life. But in the midst of it, as you watch through his story, as you read through his story, you realize, okay, he was living a real life, but he was living a good life in the midst of the reality of it. And so we're going to start off today in Joseph's early years. We're going to start off in Genesis 37 and 39. We're going to stay there most of the time. And we're going to talk about how a real good life involves paying attention to the internal stories that we tell ourselves. And we're also going to talk about how a real good life involves giving over permission to God to heal and to restore and to reorder those stories that we tell ourselves. Can we do that together? That's what we're going to do. So we're going to go into Genesis chapter 37. We're going to go to verse 2, and this is what it says. This is the account of Jacob and his family. That's Joseph's dad. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things that his brothers were doing. Now Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Joseph has a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers, of course, hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them, and they couldn't say a kind word to him. Then, one night, Joseph has a dream. And when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more, which is what we always go for. Listen to the dream, he said. We were out in a field, tying up bundles of grain together, and then suddenly mine stood straight up, right in the middle of the field, and all of yours gathered around mine and bowed down to it. And so his brothers go, so you think you're going to be our king? You think you're going to reign over us? Gotcha, okay. And they hated him even more because of his dreams and the way that he talked to them. Then Joseph, wild, has another dream again, and he tells his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. But this time he told the dream to his father as well as his brothers. And so his father scolded him and goes, what kind of dream is that, man? Are you telling me that your mom and me and your brothers are all going to bow down to you? So while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father still wondered about what the dreams meant. We're not going to get to the fulfillment of those dreams until much later in his story, later down in this series. But this is a wild thing. And as you're looking through Joseph's story, I want you to pay attention to a couple of things. And these are present in all of our stories. These are actually deeply important parts of what helps us develop our internal stories. And that's Joseph's family of origin and the gifts or natural abilities that he brings to the table. And those two things matter a lot. Those two things matter a lot because they impact so much of what we tell ourselves, how we navigate the world. So just look at Joseph's family of origin. You ready? It's a wild one. So his father, Jacob, is married to Joseph's mom, Rachel. Problem is, Rachel can't have kids. She hasn't had kids for years. And so she gets all of Jacob's love because he loved her the most, but there's a problem because Rachel has an older sister, and Jacob's also married to her. And Rachel's older sister, Leah, received none of Jacob's love, but all of the kids. She had 6 boys. And so Rachel is feeling all of the tension of this. And so she's sad. She feels less than in this experience of a family. And so she goes up to Jacob and says, I'm going to give you my servant to sleep with, and I will vicariously have children through her. And so Joseph ends up having 2 children with her servant. And then Leah sees this and goes, well, I'm still not getting any love. Maybe if I have more kids, I'll have more love. And so she says, I'm going to give you my servant. And so Jacob has 2 kids with her servant. And then finally, Rachel gets pregnant with Joseph. She has him, and then a couple years later, she gets pregnant with his younger brother, Benjamin. But as she's in labor with him, she has him, and then she passes away. So Joseph is left in the middle of one of the most wild family dynamics you could imagine. 12 brothers from 4 different moms, Two of the moms are servants of the whole thing. So that was the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And so they probably already feel kind of outsiders in the whole family dynamic. Joseph is somehow on the younger side of the family, but the favorite. I mean, this is a wild family dynamic to have to live through. And he doesn't have a mom. In this really complex family dynamic, he doesn't have a mom to advocate for him. So this is crazy. And Joseph is growing up in this. But as you watch through his story, you start to see some of his natural abilities or his giftings come out. One of the first things that we see is Joseph has this kind of intuitive commitment to doing the right thing. We see it first when he's with his brothers in the field and he notices that something isn't right. And so he goes back and tells his father. So that's one place we see as a commitment to doing the right thing. But also when you go further in his story, and he's a slave in Egypt, and he's there and his master is gone. And by the way, we find out about another natural ability or gifting that he has. In Genesis 39:6, it says, now Joseph was handsome and good looking. So not only is he all of this, he's hot, right? And so he's there, and his master's wife comes up to him and says, like, hey, listen, my husband isn't around. Let's do this. And he goes, no, I'm not going to do that. That'd be a sin against my master and against God. You just see kind of over the course of his life, this kind of intuitive commitment to doing the right thing. But then also he has this sort of natural and sort of unique openness to God. He has these dreams, and he takes that as like, this seems to be God speaking to me. He has this openness to God's voice in his life. And if he has it there, you'd probably imagine he has it in other places as well. But then on top of that, we'll see as we go forward in the story that we'll see it three different places. We'll see when he's in slavery in Egypt with Potiphar. We'll see it when he's in prison. And then we'll see it when he's the second in command of all of Egypt. That it seems like whatever he puts his hand to succeeds. And so here we have this guy now, this man with a wildly complex family of origin, who is also gifted with this innate desire to do the right thing. He's got this kind of unique openness to God, and he's got wisdom and resilience to make whatever he puts his hand to succeed. And he's hot. So take your family of origin, take your giftings, and you're going to find that they are two of the biggest contributors to the stories that you tell yourself. A helpful way that we could describe these stories that we tell ourselves is by calling them internal scripts. And the way you could talk about them is they're kind of like unconscious stories that we repeat consistently in our lives. And they're shaped by your genetics, like what you just bring to the table without meaning to, your environment, things like your socioeconomic status, your culture, your life experiences, but then also your family of origin and your natural abilities and your natural wiring. And we're wired to form these internal scripts because they help us make sense of our place in the world. And so let's just take Joseph, for example, one possible, we don't know what his internal scripts were, but just imagine, you could see from his actions in the story and the narrative, let's say his internal script was, I do the right thing. That's one thing that some of us in this room, that's what we have. You grew up an oldest child. You grew up in a family where duty was emphasized. I do the right thing. And that's what he might be living out of. And it's a short sentence, but it kind of pre-programs a lot of what he does in life. So it might come from his personality. He kind of has a natural conscientiousness. It might come from his position in the family as on the younger side, so he can kind of observe his brothers and all of their choices, and he can see what good choices lead to and what negative choices lead to. It might have come because he was listening as adults were talking, and he kind of overhears what they validate and what they don't validate, and the tone they use when they talk about certain people and the choices they make. And he's just listening to all this, and that gets kind of ingrained in him. And then over time, he kind of likely picked up the idea that, yeah, if I do the right thing, it leads to validation. If I do the right thing, it leads to more opportunities in my life in a good way. And then when your experiences confirm everything you've picked up, that internal script just gets stronger. And that's just one internal script that we carry, that we could carry. Some other ones could be things like, I'm loyal. I missed a few slides here. I'm loyal. It could be that I help. This is a big one, very altruistic one. It might be because you grew up in a situation where you had to grow up really fast and you took on a lot of responsibility early. And as a result of that, you get validated because you did. And you also might be gifted with sort of a natural ability to see other people, a natural intuition to see other people and what they're going through, and a natural intuition about what to do to help them. Your internal script could be, I'm special or I'm unique. And that sounds arrogant, I know. But maybe you grew up in a family where because of your giftings, because of your natural abilities, you got praised a lot for those things. Or maybe you kind of grew up just naturally with this like, I'm different. I like to be different. I don't want to be like everybody else. And people see that. Maybe people saw that you had leadership capabilities early. Maybe people saw that you were someone who had a talent that was great on stage. Maybe people saw that you were super creative. You were always so creative. You dress differently. You think differently. And you get validated for that. You get seen for that. And so then you start to internalize, I'm special, I'm unique. Maybe you grew up in a family where your uniqueness got passed over, actually, or maybe even actively suppressed. And so now you're still trying to find a way in the world to say, I'm special, I'm unique. Maybe you have this internal script of, I'm happy and I'm carefree. Maybe it could sound like this. If everyone else is okay, then I'm okay. Because maybe you grew up in a family where there was a lot of fractured realities. Maybe you grew up in a family where you had a lot of siblings with strong personalities and you had to navigate that. And maybe you have the gifting of being naturally more empathetic, naturally more in tune with where people are feeling included or left out of the group. Maybe your internal script is weakness is dangerous. And this can come because someone in your life had some sort of weakness that negatively impacted you, or you had to be strong from a very early age. And then maybe you're also just naturally gifted in that with being more resilient and gifted with that sense of like, I don't know, I can overcome anything. Maybe your internal script is, I matter when I succeed. And most of the time, we are totally unaware of these sentences, these messages that are constantly coming up in our lives, but they control so much of what we do. My personal script, it took me so long to actually put words to this, but mine was something like, knowledge is power. And that sounds like, what? What does that mean? But this is where it came from. My mom, who I love dearly, who will probably listen to this, so hi, Mom, love you. She's a big reason why I am the man I am today, in a lot of good ways. She had, because of her culture, because of her family of origin, developed this deep need to be perceived as successful. And because of missed opportunities in her life, because people like her father actively shut her out of having the opportunities to be successful the way she wanted to be, one of the ways that she lived out that need to be perceived as successful was vicariously through me. I think it was something like, if my son is successful, then I'm successful as a mother. And as she lives that out, what that kind of looked like was, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm the best at everything. That's what my mom told me. I'm the best at everything. Didn't matter what it was. I could not be the best at it, but I was the best at everything. And I remember that from a very early age. And there was such a benefit to that. I grew up with a level of confidence, but I also remember from a very early age seeing through it. I have vivid memories of watching my mom or listening to my mom talk to someone else about me, telling them how gifted and talented, Jesse's the best at this, Jesse's the best, talking to my teacher about how gifted I was because I was coming out of homeschool into real school. Sorry if anyone's homeschooled in here. And my mom telling me about all of he's the best speller ever. My mom gave me the answers if I just waited long enough. She'd start spelling the word for me. I saw through this from a very early age. And so what I started to pick up is that adults don't always tell the truth. Sometimes adults can construct their own reality. And so because of what I brought to the table with my personality and genetics and all that stuff, and also because of my family of origin, what I start to learn is if I am curious consistently, if I go search things out for myself, if I find out the facts, I can stand in reality, not in some sort of constructed fantasy land. And so without me even knowing it, without me ever verbalizing it, I started to have this internal script that said, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. It gives me footing in the world. And so that turned into be objective, think through everything, don't believe anything that people say, find out if things are true. And that has been a gift in a lot of ways. It's part of why I preach the way I do. I don't want to just say vague generalities. I want to be as specific as I can. It's been a gift in leadership because I want to get to the bottom of why and what and how. There's been so many gifts in that. And you see that with Joseph. His internal script, maybe it's I do the right things, or maybe it's I'm unique and special, or maybe it's I help. All of that had so much good in them. And I think that a good life, that good life that we want to live often is, it would be something like, well, my internal scripts result in a good life for me, but also it blesses other people as I intend to bless them. Like I help people, and so I go out and help people, and people feel helped. That's what, like it would feel good, right? But we're living a real life. And a real life is one where our internal scripts genuinely do bless other people as intended, but also where our internal scripts are often rooted in pain, in immaturity, in fear, in misunderstanding, and then they lead to harm that we did not intend. And you can see that in Joseph's story. He has this script, maybe it's I do the right thing, and it's well-intentioned, and there's so much good to that. I do my duty. We need people like that in the world. But the problem is that it's mixed with this lack of wisdom and this lack of awareness of all the family dynamics. It's mixed with this lack of relational depth with his brothers. There's this immaturity to it. And so he goes out and he goes, well, look, my brothers are doing the wrong thing. Let me tell my dad about it. And it gets received and experienced by other people as judgmentalism, as him setting himself up as superior, as him being the little goody two-shoes who actually is threatening their life. A gift that turns into harm. If his story was something like, I'm unique and I'm special, it could be that he had something like that, because look at his life. He's in the middle of this wild tension between dad tells me I'm special, everybody else hates me because I'm special. So you can kind of get why he maybe goes to his brothers and goes, hey guys, I had a special dream that God told me that I'm special. And maybe he's not saying any of this. Maybe it's just this unconscious need from inside that's crying out, would you see me for what I am? Would you stop treating me the ways that you're treating me? Would you just see that someone out there, the God of the universe, thinks I'm special? Would you just treat me a little better? Maybe he's not saying any of that, but the needs inside of him are pushing him to go, hey guys, let me tell you about this crazy dream I had. I don't know what it was for Joseph. But when you have those things, it turns into something that damages other people. Now his gift of being open to God, instead of being wow, he's so humble and he serves and he's such a gift and a blessing to the world, it now becomes, this guy's a word I won't say on stage. Like this guy is treating me like I'm less than simply because he had a dream from God. Now his openness to God becomes a detriment, not a blessing. This is the problem. For me, my script of knowledge is power, when it was mixed with immaturity, it's been mixed with lack of wisdom in my life, lack of relational depth with people. It has made people feel in most conversations with me like they were in a debate they couldn't win. It's made people feel like I was arrogant. And to be honest, at times in my life, I've been arrogant and a know-it-all. It's left other people feeling like they got to prove themselves to me because I don't trust their understanding of a situation. And maybe it's like that for you. Maybe you have that script of I help in the world. And that is such a good, maybe you genuinely have helped so many people. You've gotten validated for that so much in your life. And it sounds so altruistic and it sounds so noble. But then maybe because of your upbringing or your pain or trauma or immaturity or all of that, maybe you unintentionally sink a hook into people. I help, and it sinks a hook into people. Because instead of helping people to truly help them, you end up helping them to satisfy the need to be needed, to feel like I matter in the world because I helped you. And as long as people are dependent on you, when they feel grateful, when you perceive that they are feeling helped by you, man, that's a great dynamic. Things are going well. But the minute that you start to feel like they're moving past you, like they don't need you as much as they did before, now they start to feel the weight of your disappointment in them, or they sense you trying to exert more control over them. Maybe you have that script of I'm loyal, and that came from a really healthy place in your life. I'm loyal to family. Or maybe it came from a really unhealthy place and not having anybody who did that for you. But now maybe because of all of that, those realities in your life, it's lived out in a way that's so intense that it becomes suffocating and overwhelming to people in your life. Maybe your script of success is all that matters has you over-celebrating successes in public. But then when people start to get close to you, they start to notice that all of the things that you're talking about are missing some key details. You talked about all this success, but actually get behind the scenes. Like, yeah, this guy has 17,000 followers, but he hasn't actually ever started his business. He just went viral once, and he talks about his business that he runs. And people start to see that and they go, oh, okay, well, this guy isn't everything that he said he is. And they start to lose trust. But what if God is a God for all of this? What if God is a God for all of this? He knows all of the complexity of your life, all of the places where you are acting out of good and truth-based and healthy and whole places, and also all of the places where you are living out of a mix of lies or ego or dreams that you hope will save you someday. And what if he's inviting you out of the good life fantasy land? And what if he's also inviting you out of the, I just make the same mistakes over and over again, I can't ever get out of this cycle, real life? And what if he's inviting you into a real good life? But I have bad news. Because often the way that God draws us into this real good life is through something that, at least personally in my life, I might call the breaking. You might call it the pit, the valley of the shadow of death. It's these dark moments in life where everything seems to fall apart. And it might be a combination of things. It might be because of things that were totally outside of your control, choices other people made, life circumstances that hit out of nowhere. It also could be because of what you've added to the conversation, the scripts that you have in your life and the actions you take because of them. But they all coalesce into these moments where it feels like, oh no, everything's falling apart. Where life as I knew it is starting to not be there anymore. Where I've been thrown into a pit by other people and I don't know how to get out, and I think I'm seeing some of the ways I contributed to this. The breaking, the pit, the valley of the shadow of death. There's this moment that we get into in life, and if you haven't been there, I have bad news. It will likely come. It might not be all of your life. We all go to it in a varying degree, but it might be part of your life. It might be all of your life feeling like it's falling apart. But this is one of the places that God seems to use to draw us into a real good life. And I think it's because God is a God of love. He's a God of justice. He gives us free will. You'll see throughout Scripture that God does not save people from their free will choices or even necessarily the free will choices of other people. Your family dynamic, your family of origin that was built by a bunch of people with free will, and your own contribution to that and your contribution to how you take all of that and go into life, those can all contribute to the breaking. Thinking that my internal scripts will get me through life, but then they don't. And so it's in the sad part, and the reason I think that God ends up using this the most in our lives is because often we will never get to the place where we will open up ourselves enough to God for him to begin the process of restoration unless everything does fall apart. Until life becomes untenable enough lived this way that we realize, okay, yeah, I've reached the end of myself. And this happens to Joseph. This happens to Joseph because of the family dynamics that are totally out of his control, as well as his own internal scripts that added a lot of fuel to the fire, let's be honest. His brothers, when they're out in the middle of the wilderness, with no one else around, they sell him into slavery. They throw him in a pit first, then they pull him out, and they sell him into slavery. And you can just imagine as Joseph is being led away into slavery, he looks back into the distance and he sees his brothers over there, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller until they disappear. That at this moment in life, you have a choice. You have a choice to continue in the same scripts that you've had, hoping that the result will be different. Or you have to acknowledge that the life that you were living has become untenable, that it doesn't exist anymore, it can't exist in a good way. That's your choice. That's Joseph's choice at this point. And at the bottom of all of this, if you've ever gone through this, you know this, at the very bottom of the pit, as you're being led away in exile from the life that you knew, after the breaking has fully broken, if you've gone through this and come out on the other side with Jesus, you know this. There is a whisper at the bottom of the pit. There is a whisper in the middle of all of the brokenness, an invitation that you're not even fully aware of, but an invitation to now go on a journey of cooperation with God. That's the invitation at the very bottom of it all. And we see Joseph is going to be here, and he's going to say here in Genesis 39:1, when Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And right here, we're going to see the first whisper of invitation. And the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. And the thing is, you know this. Joseph had God with him his entire life. There wasn't a single moment in Joseph's life that God was not with him. He had been there through every single part of the crazy family dynamics. He had been through every single part of Joseph's life. He had spoken to Joseph in dreams. But you know, if you've been in it, that at the bottom of the pit, when there's nothing else left, that the Lord was with him, it's totally different. Because it's at that point, there's a whisper even beyond that the Lord was with him because God is faithful. Everyone else in your life might not have been. Everyone else might have failed you. Your family might have failed you. Your culture might have failed you. Your spouse might have failed you. Your gifts might have failed you. Your self-control might have failed you. But at the bottom of the pit, when you were exiled from the life that you knew, that's where you find that God is the one who remained. That God has been there the whole time, that it's there that you realize he's the one who's stayed with you. He's the one who's known you all along. The same God who was there in your childhood when you felt totally left behind, when you felt unnoticed, when you felt all of that, that same God is there with you at the bottom of the pit when it all collapses in on you. He's still there. And you realize at the bottom of that pit that there's a foundation, there's a floor down there that was there the whole time, and it's God. He's like, hey, we can build off of this. If you want to live a real good life, it starts when you're ready to give permission to the only one who can go all the way to the bottom with you, to the only one who can stick with you through the whole breaking. When you give permission to God to heal and to restore and to reorder your story according to his good agenda. And watch how God reorders Joseph's story. You ready? It says that Joseph, the Lord was with Joseph. But let's just focus here. The Lord was with Joseph. So he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. Watch this. From the time Potiphar appointed him over the household and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's household for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on everything that he had, both in his house and on his fields. Here's the thing. For Joseph before this, everything that he was doing, all the internal scripts, everything the narrative points to is that Joseph had his internal scripts pointed towards himself. Doing the right thing, well, that earns me love and validation. So I'm going to go tell my brothers. I'm going to go tell on my brothers so I can get that love and validation. I don't feel like I'm getting treated like I'm special and unique, but I am special and unique. So I'm going to go tell them about this special dream I had to be treated like I'm special and unique. But it isn't until he loses everything, not because God orchestrated it, sometimes or a little bit because of what he added to it, but really for a lot of reasons outside of his control. It's not until he loses everything that then his scripts can get melted down and then rebuilt into something with God at the forefront. And so what we see as a potential in Joseph's life is that internal script of I'm special and unique. It becomes, yeah, God has a special plan for good in the world, totally apart from me. And he's invited me to be a small, special part of it. I'm special, I am unique, but in context with a God who is the one from whom everything special and unique originates. That internal script of, you know what? Doing the right thing earns me love and validation turns into I am already loved. And so I can do the right thing even in obscurity when no one else is watching because I don't need you to tell me that I'm doing the right thing. And you see that. After this, Joseph will have that moment with Potiphar's wife, hey, my husband isn't home, let's do this. And he goes, no. And he could have. It was a shortcut to everything that his internal scripts before would have wanted. You're unique, you're special, you're validated, you have unearned status simply because you exist. But he says no, because God has started to reshape and reform him. He doesn't need the shortcuts. He can go on the obscure, quiet journey of being shaped by God, becoming somebody whose gifts are a blessing to an entire household simply because God is faithful in his life and Joseph obeyed. For me, my script, knowledge is power, that turned into over a long period of time. Yeah, knowledge is good, but wisdom is gold. James, in the book of James, he talks about how wisdom, if any of us lacks wisdom, let us ask of a God, and God will give it to us. So what it's turned into in my life is, hey, if God's going to give me wisdom, then it's always going to be in line with his good purpose, which is to love others. So now instead of knowledge being power for me to find my stability in the world, now God is slowly, and it will be the work of a lifetime, teaching me that wisdom is an opportunity to love others. This is what God does in our lives. He's inviting you and I into this for the rest of our lives, into a real good life where God uses the breaking. He uses the collapsing in, the exile from life as we knew it, to melt down our scripts, to rebuild and reorder and rehabilitate our stories, to rehabilitate our experiences of our families of origin, our giftings, our life experience, and all of it turned to good because God is faithful. And all he asks of us in this is surrender. That's all he asks, is for us to surrender, to give up our scripts, to give permission over to him so he can heal and he can redeem our stories. And while he does that, he's just inviting us to walk in simple obedience over a long time. That's all he's asking us to do, to surrender and to walk in obedience. And Joseph did that. It didn't matter where he was, whether he was a slave, whether he was wrongfully accused in prison, whether he was a vice ruler of the greatest empire in the world, the call was the same at every single step. Surrender and simple obedience to a faithful God with a good agenda. That's all it was. And so if you already know the next step that God is inviting you into, then stay faithful to that. Just start going, go do it without question. Watch what God does in your life. But if it would be helpful to lay out some next steps, here's some of the steps that we can talk about. The first one is awareness. Work with God to become more aware of those things in your life, those internal scripts in your life. Could be therapy, journaling, talking with friends. It's going to take a while. Don't be afraid of getting it wrong, because sometimes it takes a while to get to the bottom of our stories, but do it with God and not for him. And the second is surrender. Give over permission to God to do the work of healing and restoring and reordering your story. And you got to be prepared for it to hurt. You got to be prepared to be challenged at the very core of your being. You got to prepare for it to take months and years, not days and weeks. But surrender to the work of God to heal and restore you. And then last, it's just living obediently to whatever he's called you to do. Whether you're in the pit or whether you're in the palace. For one person I know, it was just praying consistently. God, I surrender. I'm going to kind of hand over all this stuff in my life and doing that consistently until the inner life started to match up with the words. For another I know who's at the bottom of the pit right now, it's just been one simple of an act of obedience every morning to start it off in a way where God can get a hold of me and compound the good choices instead of the negative ones. For another, it's stepping into their call to be a leader and refusing to let their family of origin and their culture push them into silence. I don't know what you're called to be obedient to right now, what God is inviting you into, but go do it and watch what he does. Remember this, I know you want to live a good life, but you're living a real life. But Jesus is calling you into a real good life. And it may take breaking. It may feel like being exposed or being put through the fire, but you're going to come out on the other side looking a lot more like Jesus. You're going to come out on the other side of it feeling a lot more at ease. And you're going to come out on the other side feeling that goodness of life and life abundantly. You want to know why? Because God is faithful. And he's got a real good life for you. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you're a God who's present with us in every single moment. The good stuff and the bad stuff that we have. But I trust you, Lord, and I trust that you have a real good life for us, one that is going to be challenging and difficult and hard, but in the middle of it, you're going to turn our giftedness into the blessing it was always meant to be. Thank you for being a God who can walk that whole journey with us. In your name, amen.